reason I'm doing this is because I hate lazy costuming. It is one of my biggest pet peeves. It's the reason I started a YouTube channel. I mostly just complain about people who are like, oh, that looks futuristic, that'd be pretty cool, what if I just do that? And that's how you end up with the book of Boba Fett. Or if you do it right, that's how you end up with Andor. So, this is going to be an interactive exercise, and I would really like audience participation. Okay? I wasn't able to really talk about the description because I only had so many words, but I hope this makes sense. So it's going to be kind of like improv. You give me some prompts, and I will tell you how to correctly dress that world. Does that make sense? Okay. So, are we going to do fantasy or sci-fi?
Sci-fi.
Sci-fi. Okay. Are we doing futuristic sci-fi or parallel sci-fi or past sci-fi?
Futuristic.
Sorry? Past. Okay. Has there been on this, are we doing a world or a galaxy?
World.
Okay. On this world, have they had an industrial revolution?
No.
In the middle of it.
Kind of like no. So have they been contacted by a world that has had at least one industrial revolution?
Yes.
Okay. So if you were going to dress this world, how would you do it?
What's the weather like?
Thank you. Oh, first question is the best question. All right. So let me take some notes because that's the best way to do this is to take notes. I won't show you my own notes because that's cheap. All right.
Except that it's on the screen.
No, you didn't see my notes. All right, so what's the weather like? Ignore my incorrect capitalization. Okay, so we have a world past sci-fi. Oops, I know how to spell. No contact yet. Other place, huh?
Make it bigger.
No. Yes, I will. One second. All right.
Wow.
All right, is that okay. So what's the weather like? Is it going to be a world like in Caprica, where for some reason every world has exactly the same weather no matter what? Or is it a world that makes sense, like our world, because equators and polar ice caps, and there's different weather depending on where you go on the planet, and the planet is not a continent. So what's the weather like on this planet?
The second one.
Very good.
So do we have ultra hot and ultra cold? Do we have temperate? Have we had an ice age? Are we in an ice age? Are we
In an ice
Make
age.
it gradient.
All right, raise your hands. You were first, yes.
Sometimes it rains fire, like sparks. And the caffrey. Dragon Riders of Purge.
What's that?
Like the burn books.
The Purge book. Yeah.
Oh, it's actually a
It's a
parasite.
thread.
Fire.
Yeah.
Parasites?
But it's a
One at a time.
they burn the ground though and everything they touch. So
What does?
They're sentient too.
The parasites?
I did nothing. Parasites.
Oh, yeah, that's it. Yep. All right.
Tanya's in charge.
See, learning as we go.
Testing.
All right. So,
Repeat what you just said.
yes, tell me.
What?
What did you just say? So I can hear.
So about the thread, that when it falls every 400 years, or so, give or take, and it burns everything it touches.
And that's the fire rain?
This is the idea from the books that the Dragon Riders of Pern books.
Oh, I've never read it.
Oh! Give it a read sometime.
All right, so we're in a zone where we don't shame people for not reading stuff.
I don't think it's right at the end.
Not everybody reads everything.
the person who was talking about rain and
Yep, so
fire.
fire rate.
Tell us your idea.
Every now and then it rains fire, like there's a forest fire up in Canada, and it rains sparks down here.
Okay, I like that. All right, so if they have not had an industrial revolution, how are they protecting themselves from sometimes it rains fire? Blackwig.
Animal hides, they use leather. Leather tarps, leather cloaks. It would probably be the most fire-resistant material they could get en masse very easily.
So, do they treat these with anything? Is there a plant that helps you tan the leather in such a way that it protects you from fire even more?
Let's go with this.
Because just because they haven't had an industrial revolution doesn't mean they haven't had like a Bronze Age or done something to be able to evolve their way of treating leather. So, like they're not going to have apples or pineapples or whatever, like, I know, whatever. They're not going to have earth food or earth plants. So do we have a plant that they have discovered that's good for treating leather to make it fire resistant?
Yes.
Blue hair.
The plant is difficult to get because of it's spiky.
Ooh.
It is also, when it treats leather, everything turns bright purple.
Okay, so we have a world that has clothing that, or at least this civilization has clothing that is a specific color, and unlike something like a, I'm just gonna make fun of the live action Last Airbender because it's terrible and I never explain why people have color clothing. But deciding you're gonna color code it because it looks cool instead of serves a purpose. So if you're looking at everything and it's all purple, why is it purple? That's one of the reasons why I think it's so cool that in like Andor and The Mandalorian, we've got villages where everything's kind of the same color because like the krill is, you know, this color when you treat it, and so the clothing is that color when you treat it, et cetera, et cetera.
This fellow back here is having his hand up.
Yes.
Okay, I'm trying to answer a bunch of questions at once. Okay, if you want it to turn purple and you want it to be fire resistant, you're going to need plants that high in silica, and that tends to be stuff like arrowroot, stuff that grows in water, which is going to be local, so it'll be south. The forests that are on fire are probably in more arid climes, which will also be south. I don't know. There's a lot of travel involved, so it's going to be difficult to maintain the finish on these hides. And this purple fades over time, so you can tell someone's station by whether or not their clothes are purple and they go The nice part about silica is it also makes a nice shine when you put a surface finish on with it. So shiny purple, yay!
I love this.
The flip side of that, though, is that the really old stuff, the classic antique stuff, is going to have that lost. So it's almost like you got the high status on both ends.
I love
The one
this.
piece of coterie that everyone's going to need is a mask.
Let's see.
Demonstrating generational wealth by their.
So as they're traveling, what are they traveling on? Are they using animal power? Are they using wind power? Are they using water power? What are they doing to travel to get to this place that has the dangerous purple fruit or plant?
Canals.
Huh?
Canals.
Yes.
It grows on the water.
Or a delta system that goes all the way up and down?
Okay, people, if you raise your hand, it means I can actually bring the
Yeah.
microphone to you, just saying.
So that goes first.
You said the plants tend to grow near water, and if things are on fire a lot, you probably want to be near water because your stuff might be on fire at any given time, so you want to be able to like protect it or protect yourself. So they probably do like a lot of canals, a lot of boats are maybe riding on some kind of water dwelling strange monstrosity.
Speed.
You're so fast you can't even put the D in.
I know how to spell. I went to school. Okay, yes. Yes.
So another way that they protect themselves from the fire rain is to go underground. So it's very helpful that there's another plant which can be braided and which is, it retains the sunlight and reflects it. What do you call that? Like the
Bioluminescence.
bioluminescent or just, like,
Phosphorescent.
yeah.
Phosphorescent.
Yeah.
So do we have this specific city, village, whatever, they are both water and underground, or do they each, like the next town over has better ways of moving underground and they have to partner? Or are they at war because it's easier for one group to get the plans over the other? Is it a time of peace? Like, I know this is all just kind of like basic, obvious world building stuff, but these are things that when you're watching a show, you can see what their world is doing and what they need by how they're dressed. Does that make sense? No face.
Heard that you are from some sort of water force.
Can you hear me? Yeah, go ahead and eat the mic.
Shut up in there.
Okay.
Consensually.
The further away you are from some sort of water source, or into more arid areas, there's more stone buildings. And then talking about the class again, the higher the class, the more stone, the lower the class, the more mud. Because mud is a little bit more fire resistant, kind of on the go.
So in those classes, would we see more stone jewelry? Would stone jewelry be sought after because that shows status? Is that something where people would say, oh, that person has jewelry made of mud or clay, they're clearly poor, I don't want to rob them. Whereas like they've got their jewelry made of stone, I clearly want to rob them because they've got more resources.
I would say stone jewelry is fairly common. It's the housing that the stone, because then you've got all the leftover chips. So that's where you can make the jewelry from. The more precious, just kind of like here, I would say.
So it's
More precious stones.
It shows like what it's made of, not, ooh, it's shiny and therefore it's sought after. 'Cause,
Yeah.
I mean, whenever we're kind of like projecting our own societies onto worlds that we're building, we're like, well, we like gold because gold is shiny, so let's make it gold.
I would say, yes, lots of stone-based jewelry, and then that's where you get the more precious or rare, you get the, yeah.
Not good at speaking.
Any of them.
All right.
I have another point about the stone in the jewelry, so. Actually, I think with the jewelry, what they would use, the stone is for their homes. The jewelry, they would use the stuff that isn't as stable, that they find in between the granite. Like if it's granite, they would find fissures of silver or gold or even talc or something.
Is that something where because it's not as stable, it would be seen as frivolous and that would be more fashionable?
Yes, it's more frivolous. It can't be used to make your house because it's going to fall apart.
So you're spending your time making something to wear out of something that's useless.
Useless, yes.
I like it.
It pretty always helps.
Yeah, pretty doesn't.
Pass the microphone down.
Okay. Back to the class differences, I think there's probably a plant that is closer to them and makes things purple but doesn't protect you against the fire. So if you're like a social climber, that might be an area where you might take some risks to cut corners.
So like a counterfeiter.
Yeah.
You also had, please pass them right there and then here.
Wouldn't fire season also, I mean, it probably comes in seasons, so you have some relatively safe times of year when you can travel easily. And then fire rain season is, how would you do a rain gauge for that? Bird mark? Anyway, but there's probably
Maybe
fires.
there's trees, like ironwood or whatever, where it's kind of resistant, but like, as it starts to actually look charred, you know that's too dangerous to travel.
Yes, yes, some natural indicator.
Bonus points if you're fake purple is also more likely to set on fire. But
It's like risky behavior.
to return to the jewelry temporarily, things like the low status jewelry that you'd find among the people who live in stonier regions would be more elite in the further regions. So like you see trade, presuming we have trade between these groups, whatever they could make that is unique or different to the other group, but they can give them that the other group is going to value more highly than they are, but they can make easily, going back and forth.
Okay, I'm going to hand the microphone right up here.
And if we are assuming trade between groups, the color differential between, because, okay, I lived in an area that grows beets. We can easily dye red to purple. You live someplace where you don't have that color of dye, but you have something that'll give you a blue. What's more, hey, everything's blue here. You got red? Great. You got blue? Great. So it's going to
You know,
reasonably
it almost
depend.
seems too like if we have the people who are making counterfeit stuff, I mean, that's like cutting drugs with baby powder. So we've got people where it's like, well, I need this in my body or whatever. But then you've got people who are faking the dyes too, and those people, it's sort of like when like a teenager really wants a Louis Vuitton, so they get it off like a street vendor and it looks close. So it's like, well, they're not like breaking the law or being bad, they're just being fashionable. And everyone's like, look, you're like 18, of course you don't have the resources to have like a pure purple garment. You've got to hand me down from, I don't know, lady down the street or whatever. And, yeah, I like this. I like this very much. And then I think I'll take a couple more and then we will sort of like close out this world and move on to the next one. Does that make sense? All right. Anyone back there? There's a couple.
Anyone back here? Okay. Jen, and then the person sitting next to you. Okay, go ahead.
Do we know if fire reacts the same in this world as it does our world? Because some of these components that you're talking about, does it react to fire or from fire? So are things more valuable if they've been unburned versus we're caught in a hailstorm of fire and it now changes its property?
So this is kind of funny. I had this science teacher years ago in middle school, and he loved to do these exercises with us to like create a creature on a planet, like create a planet or go to a planet that exists and like create a creature. And I remember he and I got into an argument because he said the life form has to be carbon-based and they have to be able to breathe either carbon dioxide or oxygen. And I said, I don't think that's true. And he's like, but it is. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. How do you know? There are so many planets. And I made like a snake dragon that breathed like nitrogen or something like that. And he's like, I'm gonna give you an A because this is really well written, but I want to give you a C because this wouldn't work. And I was like, prove it. So, I like the idea of maybe fire doesn't work that way there because the oxygen levels are different, or there's some other thing in the air that we don't have here, or whatever, some element that hasn't been discovered. And that's the kind of thing too, again, visual cues, like, well, does the fire hover around the people but not around the plants? Does it burn down the plants, but are the people protected from the fire because they emit something that is fire retardant, but what they wear isn't? But they need to stay warm, so they need to be clothed, so they gotta figure out a way to be able to wear clothing and then also not have the clothing set on fire even though they're on fire, whatever. Any number of things. So, yeah.
Do you want one more?
One more.
So I assume that because there's fire, there would be a lot of byproduct, like some sort of ash. So the animals probably have evolved to blend into the ash and being like ash drifts that you have to walk through or move out of the way. So maybe wearing some sort of leg or boot protection for the animals that could come from the piles of ash to bite your legs.
Ooh. Okay, so we have a world that has not been discovered by a world with an industrial revolution yet, but we could do like a Heliconian trilogy, and like the people in space are watching this happen, like it's reality TV. It's sci-fi, but it's in the past, and they're figuring things out. It's tech, but it's tech with what they have. So the weather is, we sometimes have rain that is fire. The leather is treated with a plant that is dangerous because it's spiky and it turns everything one color. So we've got a society that is all wearing the same color, but there's a reason for it, not just it looks cool. And it's one of those things that could easily be explained while you're watching the show without a ton of exposition. This is the kind of thing where I get so frustrated when we see something, we're like, oh, well, that makes sense because it's cool looking or whatever, but we never see anybody actually doing that work. We see people stringing bows, we see people sharpening swords, we see people cleaning carcasses to make into food, but we never see anybody tanning hides, we never see anybody dyeing fibers, and if we do, it's really memorable because it happens so rarely. I've been making a list, I'm working on a video called The Carrot Feeding of Sci-Fi Clothing, because it just doesn't happen as often. So, you know, watching this show about this planet, we would see somebody in the background dyeing fabric, but that's all you need. You don't need to have a ton of exposition. And then you see them, you know, fighting and going along these deltas, trying to go from city to city to get more resources, or during harvest season or whatever, you see them trading, or as they're getting closer to the dangerous time of year, they're getting a little bit more stodgy with sharing, and so we've got like conflict. And that's easily an interesting story, and it tells more if you costume it more responsibly. All right, who wants to do another one? Yeah, that was a lot of giggles, okay. I'm gonna save that, and copyright, you guys can't use it. I don't care.
I was gonna say, I look forward to seeing this.
Yeah, if I don't see fan fiction about this panel, I'm going to be hurt.
Who's writing this? I'm following you on Instagram.
And also, I want, like, this is the kind of thing that you want to see in television, in movies, but also in writing. And one of the things that frustrates me the most is when you see something like I guess people are upset about Silo because it's not doing the like color coding thing. But as someone who hadn't read Silo, I didn't see that as lacking. But if you're not going to do it, the clothing should reflect why you changed it. And one of the things that I see just visually watching Silo is, even though they don't have the color hierarchy thing, you see the people in the down deep wearing a lot of repurposed and recycled clothing. You see a lot of people in the mids wearing knits, and those knits are clearly made out of reused yarn. They're nice, they're made really well, but they're like, they gotta keep reusing the fibers. And then the people in the higher levels or whatever have really nice clothes. So if you're going to change something, it should make sense. If you're going to keep it, it should make sense. Like the Hunger Games, where clothing is very important, but a lot of times they omit those things if they are said very specifically in the writing. They omit it because clothing is frivolous, that's for girls, it doesn't matter. You get that a lot. It doesn't, we all wear clothes. And they wouldn't mention it in the story if it didn't matter, you know what I mean? All right, so let's jump off another one, shall we? All right, so fantasy or sci-fi? Fantasy. All right, magic or no magic?
Magic.
Hey, look, there's So what are you doing? Where you got Shannara, where it's like, it's sci-fi, but it's magic, but they've got tech fabrics, even though there's no, whatever. The show's terrible. So do we have, is it our world, is it a different world, is it a galaxy, is it, what is it?
Galaxy.
Galaxy, so we've got, I assume they're all connected, like they can reach each other somehow? Or-
Yeah.
Okay.
We got magic.
Space dragons!
Yeah.
Space dragons! Yes!
I want space narwhals.
Okay, dragons, narwhals. Well, I mean, those are just like mermaid unicorns.
Like portals under the sea.
Ooh, sea portals.
Maybe the animal that you ride can show a status.
Maybe there is no status on the throne.
Whales have this
You know what? That's intriguing. I like the idea of no status. All right, we're gonna stretch some brain muscles. Because okay, so did any of you watch Shadow and Bone both seasons?
No.
Oh, I really don't want to spoil. Okay, how do I say this without spoiling? There is a scene where they go to a city and everything is clearly based on a specific culture and everything is really nice and ornate, including the vendors and stalls, even though they are dressed very much like the aristocracy. And one of the notes I took when I was reviewing that season was, so everybody has money? Everybody has nice things, why do you need to vend then? Why do you have a job? So it's like, oh, that's really pretty, but does it make sense in the context of the world? I don't know. Okay, so let's do no status. That sounds great. Yes.
What if the making of clothing or...
Wait.
Oh, sure.
Be loud. Okay.
What if the making of clothing or textiles is itself a magical act?
I like that.
I knew she would.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Okay, so is this something where it's not quite status, but certain people can do this and certain people can't? So it's not like, oh, well, you're better than me because you can do it. It's just, oh, I need to go to you because I need this thing.
It seems like it should be a training thing. That
Okay.
you learn magic, you learn
So it's just a job.
weaving.
What if it's the entire
Yeah.
system of magic?
Okay, so what? Every aspect, so the weaving and the sewing and whatever, they produce different things? Different,
yes.
so let's say weaving a tapestry tells time. Or painting fabric helps with travel. Or, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. Wait, no, you go first and then you.
Okay.
The social philosophy is that there are no status differences, and in support of that, there are periodic clothing exchanges. Everybody has to bring all their clothing in and then leave with other clothing. But since there is a continuous sort of differentiation, status is sort of always creeping into the clothing expression, and then they're trying to stamp it out.
Okay. Oh, are we?
Changing up battery.
If the battery is sad.
Oh, well, that might just be that then. We
Yeah,
can
it's
just,
fine.
that one's fine. We can
Okay.
just do it, we'll do it short.
Okay.
Is it off?
It cut off and then I turned it back on, but it's
Okay.
probably gonna
So
die.
give me 1 second. Well, anyway, thank you guys so much for coming to my panel. This was really fun, and I expect fan fiction out of all of you. It's not over. My producer doesn't come until tomorrow. Oh, you didn't see that Instagram live. So status tries to creep in, but then it's quashed. Or they have to remind them that that's not how you do things and just be nice to each other.
Does that work for you?
I'm not sure.
Or like, I was kind of hearing it like, that's part of like this clothing exchange is like.
Just to reset everybody.
Just to reset everybody. Like, it's part of the culture is that you do this and then we reset that we are all, you know, in community
So that
together.
would be
and
like
then,
a big holiday.
yeah.
Do we do this like every 5 years instead of like once a year? Because I feel like once a year is just like,
Yeah.
okay.
What do you measure a year for a whole galaxy anyway?
Once
every time this comet comes around, it comes around, you know.
once a cycle. That's space time. Or they could have like a capital planet, and every time that planet does a full circuit around their sun, they do it.
Those ones are correct.
Where do they cycle which planet to determine?
Maybe it's like in Dune where they change it around. I don't know. I only saw Dune once.
By the way, I want to know what you have to wear when you're riding a space dragon from planet to planet
I was
to protect yourself.
too.
Crochet bikini.
Crochet bikini, just saying.
I mean, well, what if the planet, the capital planet, is sort of like in Foundation, where it's just kind of always been that way, and they don't quite know why, but they sort of do know why. It's like, well, you know, this is just legend. It makes sense because these were the people who came up with this, and it always worked for them, so why change anything? And so,
Working on that idea that status tries to creep back in before the exchanges, you see status creep back in a lot faster with people who are like kind of oddly shaped, because there'll be like 3 people who fit that size, and because they know it's not going to get diluted, they start spending more on their clothes because they can.
So that's almost like when you're looking at historical clothing, everybody thinks that everyone was just tiny, when really just the people who were bigger were wearing their clothes longer because it was harder to get those clothes, and so those got worn out before they could be archived. So anytime you look at a museum and you're like, that person had a size 4 foot, it's like, well, they got more options. That's why there's so many left.
And a possible criminal undermining could be, okay, the people can't do the magic, let's make devices that can. So you've got the magic loom, the magic sewing machine.
So tech creeping in to counter magic. What if, so, because I love religion in things, especially if it's not based on a deity. And what if it's like sacrilegious to deal in tech because there's magic? And if magic is accessible, why would you try to make your own? I want fan fiction.
I'm trying to get some folks who haven't necessarily said these things, so.
I can't spell this word because I am a godless heathen. Nope. That has I somewhere in it.
You're all fine.
Good enough.
Good enough. You know what I mean.
So everyone who fits like the average body shape, since they can't really express their individuality through clothing, what are they doing? Is it jewelry? Is it hairstyles? Makeup? How do they express themselves if they can't do something?
This is the tech people?
This is a society at large. Since you can't express yourself through your clothing because it's getting cycled through the cycle.
Well, going to my notes that I did not want to show you guys. So one of the things that I want to see more of is people who have hair, makeup, styling, body hair, wigs, and tattoos that are purposeful and not just, hey, it'd be pretty cool if all of the black women had frohawks. Because that's the only hairstyle we know how to do on black people. I like that in the I know people love The Expanse. I really tried. I genuinely did. I watched that first season like 7 times before I finally got to the end. But the thing I did like was the neck tattoos. I thought that was really clever, and I don't see enough of that, where it's like, okay, this is cultural because there's this thing, and it doesn't have anything to do with like a space Jesus. It's just, hey, it shows what we've endured or whatever. So the idea of doing something like a tattoo or a hairstyle or whatever, that's cool. I like that.
I was going to say that maybe one of the pieces of magic that you can imbue clothing with is that it changes to fit the size. So you don't end up with...
I want that, yeah, we want that magic.
I would build on that it changes to fit the average size, so we still have the interesting plot complication of the people who have the really small or really large or really different body shape. I'm gonna go back here. Or the changing degrees over time.
So like a glamour, like a functioning glamour, not just it looks that way, it's that it actually changes. Ooh, I like that, that's cool.
Okay, so if I'm drawing a blank now that I have a microphone. We have the tech, the system of magic is, I'm sorry. I would like to go back.
Please come back, because I'm intrigued now.
The amount that clothes can change depends on the person who made it. Either depends on their level of creativity or their how far they went along in their training or how much they have trained their skills.
So would we have our magical one, who's clearly the protagonist of the story, just has a natural, innate ability that needs barely any training? That's our super special chosen person. And those exist, they're just rare. Everyone has the ability to train, and that's why we have I don't know, magic bros who are just like, yeah man, I'm so good, I'm so awesome, and then they can't do anything. They're just all talk because they don't want to cram or whatever.
So what if the people who are different and are feared because they've become powerful and that is corrupting? And then further, that is reflected in their ornateness of the clothing, and that's why we switch. And then so there is you'll have a fancy lining for a jacket. It is all in this underworld, and there will be a tendency to do a lot of ornamentation that is out of sight.
Oh, I like the idea of hidden ornamentation.
Kind of that little special something that only you know about?
Well, did anybody ever see the Phantom Thread?
Yes.
And he would write the little messages special, and the only person who knew they were there was him. But mostly, I'll ask my clients, do you want a special lining that you know about that is special to you? And so, they'll get a custom lining that's something that, one of my favorites was, they're I like fish and I like rainbows. So I had a friend illustrate rainbow fish for them on the inside. And so, if they wanted to, they could go like this and show everybody. And if not, it was just their own little secret.
When I used to make costumes, I made linings, functional cod pieces. I would put different cartoon fabric in the cod piece lining. Just saying.
So if the magic in this world comes from the textiles, and each different group of people have different textile skills, then the day of the exchange is an important day to get magic that your family needs or is missing.
Ooh, I love it.
Like,
Well, now I'm disappointed because I want to watch this.
I know there's at least one writer in the room.
I will make fashion illustrations for whoever writes this.
So because we have this like regular cycle of exchanges that happen and you have all of these different people with these different skills that are different kinds, the older someone is, it means the more exchanges they've been involved in, and so the more hodgepodge their wardrobe becomes because they're constantly collecting more and more different kinds every time there's a cycle.
I love that. That's so cool. Well, and that sort of reminds me too of like, if you're gaining the thing just by trial and error or experience or trading with somebody, kind of reminds me of Owl House when she's learning all the glyphs and then sharing them. Aww. I love Owl House. Yes.
So back to the exchange, but also if we go back to the religion part of it, if there's a taboo against tech, a motivation for breaking that taboo could be if a planet has had some kind of natural disaster that's made it harder to harvest the fibers they need for the exchange. So they might seek out tech to either create synthetic fibers or try to delay the orbit of the planet or the...
So they're like, so do you think that they would then go to, let's say, an interplanetary council or whatever, say like, are we allowed to do this because we don't have the resources, and please do not brand us as heretics?
Yeah, either that or preemptively be like, they're going to brand us as heretics, so we have to hide it.
Let's do those two back there, and then you, and then we'll be done.
Okay.
And then I'll read my notes.
So I don't know about anybody else, but I tend to rip my clothes a lot, which seems like that would be bad for your magic system to be ripping right through it. So maybe some sort of sturdier fiber that changes the like weight of the clothes and how it fits.
What was the first part?
Ripping right through the fabric of your magic system is probably not a great thing when you rip your clothing. Which also makes me think that there would be people that are specifically trained to repair somebody else's previously made magic.
Mending, mending, mending. I almost feel like mending would be one of those things where it's like, it's clearly needed, but like, the youth think it's dumb, so they don't want to learn it. So like, menders are few and far between, that kind of thing. Yes?
Okay, since I have to be last, I'll try to do this all together.
Louder, please.
Question. All right, sorry. It sounds like if you have, not everybody able to make their own clothes, only certain spell weavers can do this, and they vary in ability. You've got inherent pressure to create class, which means someone's regulating this, which means they're cracking down on these spell weavers. They're not an oppressed class who have a motive to create clothing that does naughty things like conceal technology, which is also a heresy. So if you've got an artificial arm and you need to hide it, someone's going to have to make it fancy sleeves, and you don't want to get caught. So if you have to exchange these clothes once a year and you need to get new magic, you're going to have to find somebody else who has a big time who's been hiding it the whole time. And this is intergalactic with whale undersea portals.
So we got one more here, and then we're done.
So
We got Elizabeth here, you too.
Everyone can hear you.
So we are assuming that we are addressing the population that applies a standard 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head. What's the occasion when the 8-legged bug people show up for clothing?
Oh, we do need to have like a big bad.
Or is it, oh my God, it's a rare event, happy days, or oh
you
my
know
God,
what?
it's the
I feel like
invaders?
that would be more interesting because I mean we always have like insects or non-humanoid aliens being the bad guys, so it would be interesting. It could almost be like, again, the religious experience. It could be like a blessing. You get the chance to stretch your creative muscles by having to dress something you've never had to dress before. All right, so this sounds awesome. You guys did really well, and I want to read/watch this. So we've got a magical federation of planets that their entire culture from planet to planet is based on clothing and fiber construction. And I guess like one last additional thing, it almost makes sense to be able to make little bits of magic if you were the people who were kind of contributing to that too. So the people who are growing the crops, the people who are tanning the hides and slaughtering the animals, the people who are dyeing the things. So not just the people who are making the fabrics, the fibers, the clothing, but the people who are like building up, they get a little bit of magic as a treat. So if you were watching something like the last two things we talked about, would that make the world make more sense to you? If you could just see that and go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Would it make you frustrated if some people were just like wearing jerseys? Jetsons clothes? Because it just looks kind of cool visually? It'd be jarring, right? Like when you're watching something, you're like, it's kind of bad. It kind of looks stupid. Why does it look stupid? And a lot of people don't think, oh, it's because it looks out of place. This doesn't make sense in the society that we are trying to show. We spent the time making these sets. We've spent the time creating this tech. All of this other stuff makes sense. Why doesn't it make sense? So, when I am critiquing a show for my channel, the things that I think about first and foremost are culture. I want to look at religion. So something like Raised by Wolves or Foundation, is what they're wearing flagging that they are religious, or is it adhering to some sort of doctrine? Is it a modesty thing? Is it a war thing? Is it remembering somebody that you worship? Tradition, superstition, hair, makeup, styling, body hair, wigs, tattoos. One thing that just absolutely bugs me is when people use non-white cultural clothing because they look cool, but they don't change anything. So watching something like Shadow and Bone, we see a lot of things that are obviously inspired by European cultures, but they don't look like they're just straight up European replica outfits. They look like they've been changed in some way. So you're like, oh, I see what that is inspired by. But then you've got Shu Han, and it's like, well, that's clearly China. What else? You've got, I can't remember the name of the other place, but it's like, well, that's clearly like Sub-Saharan Africa. This is clearly Nigeria, but what else? Change it a little bit. And the only time I really saw anything that was different than that was the pirate girl on the cleanest pirate ship I've ever seen in my life. That is the biggest ship. There were not enough pirates. They were all so clean. Unacceptable. So then also, the next thing I think about is evolution and discovery. What's the climate? What's the access to materials? Has there been an industrial revolution? What are they wearing natural versus man-made fibers? And has there been mending? Why? If you're living in a post-apocalyptic society, there should be wear and tear. There should be mending, obvious mending. So something like the 100, awesome job, depending on which part of the, if you were on the ship, if you're underground, if you're in Mount Weather, if you're in the bunker, if you're in the future, what do your clothing look like based on what you have access to? Society, fashion versus clothing. Clothing is a message, fashion is a message, clothing is what you're wearing to protect you from the elements and protect your modesty. Heathens. Uniforms, what are they for? Is it, again, religious? Is it for work? You gotta live in your clothing, so if everything is too clean, it doesn't make sense, especially in something post-apocalyptic. Roll around in the dirt, run it over with a car. If you're making a costume, it's like, oh, well, that looks right, but literally run it over with a car. You should have seen the group chat for the Connie and anyway. Throwing away versus mending. There's got to be a lot more mending. Why wouldn't you have more or less clothing in a world with a diminished population? So in Sweet Tooth, we've got people who are living in small spots, and so they're not going out to hunt for more resources, so they're mending their clothing. Whereas people who are living in neighborhoods where like almost all the people have died, but there's a small amount of people, they can go and get more clothes. Or the family that's living in the ski lounge, it's just two adults. Oh God. Sorry. It's 2 adults and a child living in this ski chalet for 12 years. They have infinite amount of clothing in the gift shop, and the kid is growing, so once he grows out of the little clothes, they're almost gone. Now he's got adult clothes, so they've got the nicest clothes in the show. And then The Last of Us, we've got people who like go on raids, they have shitty clothes, sorry. And they've got people who have resources, so you can tell just by looking at them. Blah, boring. And then, how do you make it make sense? The current feeding of science fiction. Raised by Wolves did a really good job. They actually show a scene where Mother is weaving clothing, like weaving fibers, for less than a minute. She's talking to her son, she's weaving, and then later we see the kids wearing nothing but handmade, hand-woven clothes. Before that, they're little kids wearing the same latex outfits as the adults, but they grew out of them. So she is using the resources to make more clothes for them as they grow. The 100, I already said it. Watch my video. Very long. It's my first video, so it's super awkward, but it has all of the things. I took so many notes. Knitting, production, goddamn shoes. Do not put molded sole shoes in an apocalypse. They will fall apart. If you are in space, do not molded sole shoes. You gotta sew them. You gotta sew shoes. You can't. Molded soles come from factories. You have to use equipment to. It's so frustrating. So like, even down to shoes, it's gotta make sense. Color symbolism. I actually I'm running out of time, but watch my video, second video about Lovecraft Country. I talk about the color symbolism in Gia, in the making of a monster. And then dress your children. Don't just like throw kids in it if you're not going to put as much time and energy into dressing those kids. Star Wars, for all of its faults, does a really good job of dressing its children. Even though Obi-Wan was not my favorite, they did a great job of dressing Leia. She looked like she lived in that world. It made sense. They put care into dressing that child. And then lastly, we got consistency or lack of. The Witcher is the whipping boy of my channel. I can't stand that show. The costumes are trash. I started watching the new season, and it looks like they waited until the very last minute to do anything that made sense with consistency. The costumes are pretty freaking good. And they have been terrible. Watch my video. Willow, trash. I know it's handsome. Dune. Dune was pretty good. Like, even though it's not what it is in the books, it's good and it makes sense. At least it's consistent. If you're going to move away from the book descriptions, it needs to make sense within the world you've built in your visual media. Bad example, Shannara Chronicles. There's tech fabrics even though it's magic. That doesn't make any sense. There's no tech in that world. It's just magic. They shouldn't have tech fabrics. Book of Boba Fett. Demolition Man is great. It actually still holds up. If you haven't had a chance to watch it recently, it's still just as good. And if you look at Sandra Bullock, you'd be like, well, she's obsessed with 90s stuff. It makes sense that she's the 90s. The men all have what I call neutral haircuts. Haircuts that could be 50 years from now or 70 years ago. The rich people all have interesting fashion that doesn't quite look like something we would have back when that movie was made. But the female cops all look like Sandra Bullock, so the 90s thing doesn't make sense because they weren't consistent with the female cops. And good examples would be The Hunger Games. If you just watch the first movie is pretty good, but if you watch the other movies, the first movie is trash. Wheel of Time, perfect. Watch my video. The 100, really, really good considering it's a CW. Andor, that is some of the most thoughtful and responsible costuming I've seen. Building cultures from planet to planet, they all look different and they don't look like Star Wars TM. Demolition Man, still good. Silo, good. If you haven't watched Silo, I really enjoyed it. They did a really good job of showing the status, depending on their clothing, without using the color thing from the books. Whew, got through my notes. Okay, questions. Yes?
What is your channel and or social media?
It is called Cinematire, and boop, boop, boop. There we go. My logo is this. Oh no, help. Okay, here we go. I'm going to be putting some of this stuff up on my channel later, but my Andor video is great. I did a really hilarious video on a terrible show called Gen Zeros. That was the first and only show made by and for cryptocurrency. It is bad, and it is starring so many Canadian actors I like. It is the worst, you guys. Last of Us is perfect. Season 2 of Shadow and Bone is disappointing. Anyway, please watch my channel. Please subscribe. There we go.
That's 2 T's if you're not close.
It's cinema.
I write it down.
One minute. Any other questions, comments, moans, groans, suggestions for building a world?
In the novel I've been writing, I have an elven. In the novel I've been writing, I have several different cultures. I have an elven culture, which I describe like all the people are green, but there's slight differences depending on what guild they are, like depending on whether it's the hunters or whether they're the bakers or the farmers or what have you. And I've had trouble trying to figure out just exactly what to say. I got a suggestion like, well, maybe wear a different color armband. I'm like, that's just too basic. I have another group that they were refugees centuries ago, and they weren't allowed to own land, but the king didn't scare them off, and so now all their clothes have patches in them because they had to just keep trying to mend what they already had.
Okay.
So over the centuries, they've
I mean, I would say instead of an armband, something like embroidery, and like embroidery tells a story, or the embroidery is like a family tree or something. Because then looking at it, you'd be like, oh yeah, that's like that. Or, I don't know. I feel like a lot of cultures use embroidery in that way, and I think you could do something interesting with it.
How many pieces of flair do you have?
Yes. Well, I appreciate you guys listening